right, welcome to it. Good morning. The Chris Salcedo Show on the Voice of Texas, AM 700, KSEV. Gee, I wonder what we're going to talk about. I was just saying this to Russell. I'm going to approach this differently today, folks. I was at Ash Wednesday services last night, and I could not get the families of those children, and now we know one of the first people identified as a coach, football coach, who was killed by, at the very least, we can call him a mentally disturbed individual. We don't know his background. We don't know whether he's bullied. We know he was a lone wolf. We know he was a lone wolf. We know he was a loner. Didn't have very many friends. Was a gun enthusiast. No, see, that's not even right. He was fascinated by guns, and there's a difference. He was, well, here's one student describing Nicholas Cruz. Those who had access to this guy had picked him out as being one of the folks most likely to do something just like this.
Honestly, a lot of people were saying that it was going to be him, stuff like that. We threw a lot of kids threw jokes around like that, saying that he was going to be the one to scoot up the school. But
so let me get this straight. Everybody knew this kid was obsessed with weapons. Everybody picked him to go crazy. He was suspended from the campus, but somehow wound up on the campus with an AR-15. You ever shot an AR-15? You know how big an AR-15 is? How did this kid get on this campus with that AR-15? Not to mention the multiple magazines he had. I'm just asking these questions. It's because our nation's high schools are soft targets, in my humble opinion. They're soft targets. It's easy. Those who say that our high schools should be places of utopian learning and mind expansion, I agree, that's what they should be, but they're not. That's what they should be, but they're not. So you can live in the world that should be, or you can live in the world that is, and then try to come up with solutions to stop what's going on in the world that is. Does that make any sense? Look, I'm going to open this up to everybody. I don't want you libs or you Democrats to be shy about offering solutions. I'm going to have a discussion with you today. Now, if you start coming on and saying it's people like me, it's my fault that these happen, then we're going to have words. But if you call up here in earnest and you say, look, here is my idea to prevent these types of tragedies from happening, and I would appreciate it if you'd keep that in mind. Because I've got a steady diet of Democrat sound bites, elected Democrats, already politicizing this before the bodies had been moved out of the school. They were already jumping on the air and politicizing this. One went so far as to say, if you vote for a Democrat, these mass shootings will stop. I kid you not. His name is Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut. Now, he didn't specify how he was going to do this. He just said, if you vote Democrat, these mass shootings won't be happening anymore. I'll play the soundbite, and then you guys can be the judge. To the rest of you who may be sane in the Democrat Party, and to the rest of you who may be actually in earnest to offer solutions here, let's talk about it. Let's throw out your ideas. I'll ask questions. I'll throw out some of my ideas. You ask questions. And maybe, just maybe, we might be able to come to a consensus on something. Here's what I do know. Every American with a soul wants these mass shootings to stop. Now, I know there are going to be some of you militant libs out there who will say, oh, no, Chris Salcedo, he's a conservative. He likes all the carnage. I know you'll say that. It's not true. But I know you'll say that. And if you want to call up here and have that discussion, then we can do that as well. I will be as civil and as constructive as my callers are on this issue, because at the end of the day, it's not Marco Rubio. It's not Senator Nelson. It's not Debbie Wasserman Schultz or Senator Chris Murphy or any one of these elected leaders we send to Capitol Hill who are going to be the deciders on how to safeguard our kids. That decision is ours. That decision is ours. They can't get out of their own way on Capitol Hill. We have to decide. Back to the student who was identifying Nicholas Cruz, saying that every kid knew he was going to snap.
It turns out, everyone predicted it. That's crazy.
Wow, he must have come onto campus then, right?
Yeah, he was on the third floor. He knows the school layout. He knows where everyone would be at as of right now. He's been in his fire drills. He's prepared for this stuff.
He pulled a second fire alarm of the day. The attack was very well planned out. Since he had been suspended, he had probably been cooking this thing up. Questions that I don't have answers to. How did he attain an AR-15? Now, he's 19. If he had no prior criminal record, then he bought it legally. So is a solution that if you're the age of consent, which is 18, that's too young to buy a firearm. Oh, you can go and die in a war for your country, but you can't buy a firearm, which is your constitutional right as an adult. As a matter of fact, I know children by my standard, I mean 15, 16, I'll be taking my daughters soon, getting them on some firearms, training them how to shoot, training them how to use weapons. It's not illegal. So would a law prohibit or raise the age of consent to buy a firearm? Then you get into the same discussion that we've gotten with alcohol. So let me get this straight. I can't have a drink until I'm 21, but I can go and die for my country at 18. What's that all about? That's still up in the air. And I'm just throwing this stuff out as ideas. But what does a solution to this problem look like? And we'll be asking this question over and over and over again this morning and then getting your feedback. What does a solution to all of this look like? Now, if my political opposition were honest, which few of them are, but if they were honest, they would come on this show and they would say, we need to ban weapons. No more firearms. No more AR-15s. To which I would respond, well, when has that worked? They would respond, over in Europe. I said, yes, it worked wonders with the Paris shootings, with radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorists rampaging through the streets of a defenseless country. It works wonders in Mexico, where they disarm their people. And ruthless drug cartels have their way with those people, killing them, maiming them, intimidating them. They have no means of defense. So is removing guns from the law-abiding citizens' hands the answer? Or would you be inviting more carnage? Would you be inviting an environment that's less safe for every American by disarming them? Because I can tell you, as horrific as these mass shootings are, those who perpetrate these mass killings, they are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of our society. The majority of gun owners, who are legitimate gun owners, are not violent. They know and understand and respect the power behind those firearms. This kid lost his mother last year, was adopted. I'd like to know how he was raised before then, and what type of respect he was raised with for human beings. And let's not forget the cultural component. I know that a lot of you liberals and a lot of you progressives out there are anti-God. You despise God. I understand that. I get it. And then you worked very hard to remove God from our schools. And you succeeded. God is gone from the campuses. How's that working out? Can we not see a direct correlation between the escalation in violence? Because when I was going to school over 3 decades ago, this kind of stuff wasn't happening. It wasn't. But as soon as God was prohibited from being in the school, and I'm not even talking about being backed up by teachers. I'm just talking about being allowed. You can't even talk openly in these schools about God without being punished. You can't put "In God We Trust" on your locker without some school administrator saying, "No, can't do that. Can't do that." But you can talk about abortion all day long on college campus or high school campus. It's cultural rot. As a matter of fact, there was a teacher who jumped onto the Facebook page who heard my discussion yesterday about government-run education, and then said, I hope you don't try to blame this shooting on teachers like you do everything else. To which I said, I don't blame it on teachers. You must not have listened very closely to the program yesterday. There has to be a way that we as Americans can say, look, we both find these shootings despicable, disgraceful, unacceptable. So how do we solve the problem now? How do we do it? By preserving everybody's rights? And the Democrat and the liberal will say, well, you can't do that. You're going to have to give up your rights for this false sense of security. Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, all the gun laws and restrictions that have been passed, these very same progressives told us, this will solve everything. This will solve everything. And of course, as we all know, it didn't. It didn't even stand in the way. And as a matter of fact, I think it complicated a lot of things. It gave us a false sense of security. Now, I've got plenty of ideas on how I think we should tackle this, but I want to hear you guys. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. And to you progressives who may be brave enough to actually call this program, very few of you there are. Keep in mind, how will your solution have stopped what happened yesterday in Parkland, Florida? How will it stop these things? Not make you feel better, not be a mamby-pamby token restriction on everybody's gun rights that would have no prayer of stopping a similar incident. How do we stop the carnage at our soft target government-run schools? 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. It's Chris Salcedo Show and the voice of Texas. Chris Salcedo Show. By the way, if you were with us yesterday, we had highlighted the Louisville ISD superintendent basically placing his thumb on the election scale, using taxpayers' money to tell his teachers to vote against conservative candidates who are for school choice. And it turns out, well, the Attorney General dropped some letters yesterday, 3 of them. One of them happened to be in Louisville ISD. Apparently, I wasn't the only one watching these cats. And Brazosport, also in our listening area, Brazosport actually was one of these schools that got targeted. We'll probably get into this hot and heavy tomorrow, folks, because of the shooting, barring any other breaking news. But I just wanted to get that out there. We'll probably mention this throughout the day, that it looks like allowing these school districts to break the law, well, that's not going to happen. The Texas Attorney General is clamping down, saying, I don't care how left-wing you are, it doesn't give you the excuse for the misuse of public funds. You're breaking the law. It's called electioneering, and it's wrong, and you can't do it. So I thought you all ought to know. We'll get into that probably hot and heavy tomorrow. In the meantime, let me get out to your phone calls. Solutions, folks. I want to focus on solutions. I don't care whether you're conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican. How do we stop this type of carnage from happening again? Fred, glad you waited. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. Go ahead, sir.
Chris, the first thing I can immediately think of, one bullet could have stopped this lunatic. And the fact that you're coming into literally a barrel of fish and somebody's got a gun and they're shooting at you. This is totally insane. The other point I want to make, they're talking about, the Democrats have a solution. We had this problem under Bill Clinton. We had the Oklahoma City. We had, we had the World Trade Center. We had all of these issues under Democrats.
Well, Columbine.
San Bernardino, Columbine. We had all of this stuff. The political party is not necessarily switching to Democrats going to solve all the problems of the world. That's facetious.
Well, what Chris Murphy was alluding to, and I'll play the soundbite, Fred, a little bit later. What he was alluding to is that the only thing standing in the way of a solution for gun violence is Republicans. And if you just elect Democrats, then they will pass a law that will stop all of this violence. Of course, he never specified what law that is.
But Chris, here's another fact. More people are murdered in this world by other than guns. More people die. There's more deaths that are caused by cigarette smoking, automobile accidents, knifing, stabbings. There are more stabbings than there are.
I get all the statistics, and you know what? And the only reason I'm cutting you off, Fred, is because I had a liberal show up on my Facebook page too and started throwing a whole bunch of stats. I go, look, we all agree that we want to see this stop. So how do we solve it? I want to go back to what you originally said. One bullet. You know what? You know where they arm security guards in their schools? You know what country does that? Israel. Israel does that, Fred, and they don't have school shootings. So is it fair to say that that's what you're advocating, is that we get armed security for our nation's schools to guard our most precious resource? Fred, did we lose him? Okay.
No, he's there.
Fred, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, go ahead. So is that what you meant? Train security for the schools? Yeah.
Yes, and we have thousands of veterans who are unemployed and out of jobs that are very highly trained in weaponry and protection and fighting and so forth that could work in our schools. Just, put 3 of them.
Well, and again, that's the first step, Fred, right there. They've got command of the firearms. They have a lot of tactical knowledge. There would need to be some sort of focused training, and there are services all over this country that would be able to train them for close quarter with a disarmed population inside the schools to minimize the carnage and basically this would also need to be a retraining of how we arrange our classrooms where the teacher is seated. I think allowing teachers who would be willing to go through the training to arm themselves would also be something that would be a good remedy to this if you didn't want uniform security.
Chris,
yeah.
The architectural design of the buildings, the entrance, the access,
right,
and the fact that, when we go back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, I could see the problem coming when we kept having planes hijacked to Cuba.
Yeah.
We didn't check people for guns or knives or weapons or anything. And very slowly that evolved where now we thoroughly check.
Yeah,
Are we going to need to do that in our schools? If necessary, sir, we need to do that.
Absolutely. And you know what, Fred? This kid, young man, brought in an AR-15 into the school. I mean, that's not really.
Do that?
I know exactly. It's not really easy to conceal for those of you who know what an AR-15 is and how bulky that thing is. It's kind of hard to walk into a school with an AR-15 and not be noticed. Fred, I appreciate the call. Thank you for the solution-centered ideas. Andy, you're up next here on the Salcedo Show. What's your mind? What's on your mind?
Well, let's just take Cy-Fair Independent School District, Chris.
Okay.
12 high schools. You're looking at about, if you want 4 guys at every high school, you're going to need at least 4 because all the compare Cy-Fair school, the Cy-Fair school to the new school. You need at least 4 that are rotating. And then you're going to need 1, so that's 48 employees. You're going to need 1 guy in charge of those guys. one top-notch guy that can set it all up, what they do, and take a guy's place when he's got to have a day off. They can have their vacation time in the summertime. They also get, the weekends. You get 4 weeks a year during the school year, to the spring and fall. You're looking at about $3.5 million for Cy-Fair.
Okay, now let me offer another solution. Maybe.
No, hold on. I don't mind that. I mean, what's their budget?
No, I'm not saying that. But again, if some smaller districts don't have that kind of money, then what about offering? Because I know plenty of teachers who are proficient in firearms. What if teachers inside the school, either administrators or teachers in the classrooms, volunteered to go through specialized training, a one-time expense for the school district, and get them trained to be there?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Chris, okay, you know firearms, right? And I know firearms.
Yes.
Did you hear the video yesterday
Of
the kid in class?
Yeah, I saw that video. It's horrific.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And you heard pop, 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 pop. All the guy has to do is get inside. Look, now the people who want to commit these acts of evil.
Yeah.
And by the way, evil will always exist until the end. And so you can't make evil go away, because 9/11. Guess what? No gun was used in 9/11. How many people were dead after that day?
No, I get it. And, I got the music.
Hold on.
I got the music playing, Andy. I've got very limited time. Why don't you just hang on through the break? We'll get more of your reaction here, and more of your ideas for solutions. Folks, I think that it's fair to say that there are teachers out there who are proficient who could do this job too. I'm saying it's an idea. I'm not saying it's definite. We should just look at it. Back in a minute, the Chris Salcedo Show, the voice of Texas. Stick with me. Okay, hour 2 underway. Welcome to it, everybody. The Chris Salcedo Show, holding Andy over from last hour because he had a couple of more things to say. Just to remind everybody what we're talking about. Solutions. All you Dems and you Libs are welcome here, too. Again, the focus is, how do we prevent shootings like we saw in Parkland, Florida yesterday? That's our point of emphasis. Don't call up here and give me a whole bunch of stats. Don't call up here and tell me that we've got a problem. I think we all recognize we've got a problem. We know that we want to stop these things, so let's focus on some solutions, shall we? Andy, I wanted you to have wrap up what you were saying, so go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Cy-Fair Independent, about 3 or 4 years ago, got their police force. They have a police force, school police force. Mm-hmm. So that $3.5 million, you could probably drop that down about 2.75 if you're going to hire 4 guys for each one. But these guys, look, then you're talking about football games. You're talking about basketball games, because if the individual wanting to commit evil can't do it at the school, and most of these kids are from the schools. They go to the schools, so they understand there's a football game over here, there's a basketball game over here, so they can commit the evil. But trying to get, you say the teachers, arm the teachers. Problem with that is, Chris, which teachers? Because the kid can come in one place, if the teacher's way down, upstairs, way down in the hall, he still can do the carnage, can have the carnage he wants. Well, look, before somebody gets to him.
There is a component there to where you'd have to coordinate. First off, you'd have to put it on a volunteer basis. Nobody wants to say to a teacher, "Hey, take up weapons," if they're not comfortable doing that. I know plenty of teachers who would say, sign me up. I know firearms. I want to take the training. I want to be ready. And no, you're not going to stop the kid from opening fire and getting the initial rounds off, but you may turn a 17 body count to a 5 body count if somebody's close by with a weapon that can respond. And then Andy, one last thing, the deterrent factor. The reason why these kids show up to these gun-free zones, these nutty individuals, is because they know they will meet no resistance. They know they will meet nobody there with a gun. If all of a sudden Cy-Fair starts proposing, hey, we've got, not only do we have armed personnel, we have armed teachers. You crazy nuts. You decide which teachers are armed. You come on in. And you advertise the heck out of it. That's a great deterrent for these nutcases who know they're going to be able to go in unopposed right now.
Well, there's a reason you put perimeters, and that's what you want. You want them stopped before they have access to the school.
Well,
Why you have to hire people and put them outside and let them do their patrols. You want to talk about a deterrent? That's it right there.
Well,
with you coming up.
That's part and
That's what
parcel
we
too.
need.
But what's wrong with having multiple layers? If the first layer fails, you've got a backstop. If that backstop fails, you got another backstop. I think it's worth it to safeguard our kids in school.
I do too, and I think that's what you're going to have to. They're going to have to spend the money, and I don't know what Cypher's budget is. Let's say it's $2.5 million because I forgot about the police force. Guess what? $2.5 million is probably a drop in a bucket for Cypher's budget.
Well, you've already got the police force there. You've already got the underpinnings to build on. So maybe a lot of that expense could be absorbed there. Andy, I appreciate you waiting across two breaks here on the Chris Salcedo Show. Eric, you're up next. Welcome to The Voice.
Hey, Chris, thanks for taking my call, sir.
Sir?
I would say that I think that you and Andy are onto something right there. Most districts have resource officers, which are part of the local PD, or they have a police force if they're big enough. Like Cy-Fair and Houston Independent School District are a couple of massive school districts,
right? And
also a voluntary basis for a teacher, a designated teacher on each campus. It would have to be voluntary, of course, and it's a bonus if they're ex-law enforcement or ex-military with a clean record. I think that would go a long way to preventing future incidents such as this. And also, an AR-15, you can break it down, the upper receiver bolt carrier group from the stock pretty easily. And it would fit inside a backpack.
Right. Well, that's possible. Now that you mentioned that, but then he'd have to reassemble the thing. And
True.
Wouldn't you think that he may have? And again, he was suspended from this campus, and we can't forget that.
Was he inside the campus?
Yes.
Or was he outside waiting?
There was a warning on this kid. He wasn't to be allowed on campus, but somehow he got on.
That's incredible.
I know. Well, it shows you how lax and how soft a target our nation's government-run schools are. They are soft targets.
Yeah. That was ridiculous right there.
Yeah.
And plus, his fellow students knew he was whacked. So, I mean, the warning signs were there, and he was seeking mental health treatment. I heard it on Fox News. And Judge Napolitano also said that AR-15s are very powerful weapons. No, I have to correct him on that. They're very efficient weapons. Not necessarily the 223 is not a very powerful.
Yeah, that's only
caliber.
The 223 is only a 22 slug, right? I mean, it's
just slightly bigger.
Yeah, you go to the 5.56, that's going to pack a little bit more of a punch, but I mean,
it is. Yeah.
But look, I understand. Look, he's powerful in a sense that you can fire off a lot of rounds. They're incredibly accurate, and
yes, they are,
and very intimidating.
Yes.
So. Maybe that's what he was. I don't think the judge is a firearms expert, but maybe he shoots for all I know. I don't know. But anyway, thank you for the call, Eric. I appreciate it. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. Now, look, all you liberals and you Democrats out there, I just want everybody to notice who is calling up with solutions and who is not. I have not heard from a Democrat. I have not. As a matter of fact, the closest I have is a former military guy who is now a current school teacher corresponding with me on the Facebook page. By the way, you want to go to Facebook. It's real easy to find. KSEVradio.com. KSEVradio.com/Chris Salcedo, CHRIS SALCEDO. You'll find Facebook, Twitter, and email all right there. A one-stop shop. He is the only one that I speculate leans left who is engaged in a meaningful manner on this topic. I think it's like illegal immigration, folks. I don't think they want a solution to this. Let me play MSNBS having a conversation with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And let's see if the elected Democrats are offering any solutions.
Well, what is your feeling as a political figure, a leader, in fact, about gun control on this point? Because, if we were having...
Right away, it's gun control, folks. Nothing that we have discussed about hardening our schools as targets. it's immediately gun control.
Situation today where a kid, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old in this case, Nicholas Cruz, the alleged assailant here, had thrown dynamite sticks into the windows of a school, would say, keep dynamite sticks away from kids, against some people that shouldn't have them.
He's 19. He's not a kid. He's a young man. Now, I'm willing to hear the law that says that 19 is too young to own a firearm. We can send you away to war and have you give up your life for this country, but you shouldn't be able to own a firearm in the United States. Let's have that debate, Chris Matthews. Let's have that debate. And by the way, the legal age of drinking is still 21, ladies and gentlemen, not 18. Many people have been making the case that if you're old enough to go and die for your country, you should be old enough to have a legal drink. I think there is some wisdom in that on both sides. That want to say, well, when you're 18, you're maybe not in a position to make the wisest choices about how you consume alcohol. But of course, there are some 35. Heck, there's an elected Democrat by the name of Victoria Nieve in North Texas. She drank and got behind the wheel, was arrested for drunk driving, and she's a lawmaker in Austin. So I don't know that age necessarily has to do with good sense.
But when it comes to guns, it's their sacred right to have a gun that is stopping us from doing anything about this. And we're going to go through this again in a couple months. It'll be some other school. We'll act shocked, which we will. We'll talk about prayer, which we should. But in the end, we'll know why it happened.
Notice how he mocks prayer. He's not the only one. There are some others that are doing this as well, but we'll get into greater detail on that. But see, to Chris Matthews, he's not even willing to entertain. He can't even see that there is another component here, which preserves liberty and actually works. He says if kids were throwing dynamite through windows, we'd say, let's keep dynamite out of the hands of people who shouldn't have it. Well, we already do that. Dynamite's not readily available. So what he's proposing is he wants to make firearms as rare for public purchase as dynamite is. How is that consistent with the Second Amendment? And what does that do for law-abiding citizens? Chris Matthews doesn't care that this shooter is not emblematic of the vast, and I mean vast majority of individuals who own firearms.
Because it's possible in this country, in fact, plausible, that it will happen fairly regularly.
No, you're damn right, Chris, and it's absolutely not too soon to yet again say that something has to be done.
The bodies had not been taken out of the school when Debbie Wasserman Schultz was making this statement. It's not too early. It's never too early for these progressives to politicize death.
Yet again say that something has to be done about access to guns in this country. But just as important, something has to be done about making sure that people who have mental health challenges get the help that they need.
Now, I can agree with part of that statement. There is not one conservative that I know of, one NRA member that I know of, who I know of, that says, oh, crazy people ought to have access to guns. Now, it's reported out there, and I'm just going to go on the reporting. This kid was seeking mental health help. Do we need to have a date? Now, when did he purchase these firearms? Before or after? Whose firearms were they? We don't know the answers to these questions. Debbie Wasserman Schultz didn't know. Chris Matthews didn't know. But it didn't stop them from hitting the air and saying some pretty irresponsible things. And this is how the whole issue gets clouded. Guns are the problem. No, I don't think guns are. I think people are the problem. And the wrong people getting their hands on guns. So how do we solve that? 281-558-5738. 281-558-KSEV. We're focused on solutions that would work. Chris Matthews and Debbie Wasserman Schultz solutions, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz didn't offer any. Chris Matthews kind of sort of did. We'll get into all of this coming back. Your calls, because this is going to be an American decision, not just the elites up on Capitol Hill. Back in a minute. The Chris Salcedo Show on The Voice. Chris Salcedo Show. We're focused on solutions, folks. We're not going to get mired into the politics of this. Although our Democrat friends are making it very hard not to do that. But we're going to try to keep our eyes on the prize here. Solutions. And you Democrat and you liberal folks out there who listen to the Chris Salcedo Show, and I know you listen, call up. Let's have a discussion about this. Here's what we all agree on. We want the mass shootings to stop. We all agree on that. Bruce, thank you for holding. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. What say you?
Well, good morning. How are you today?
Doing well, sir. Thank you for being here.
Well, I agree with you. It's not so much a gun problem as it is a people problem. You look at how many people are killed every year by drunk drivers, but you don't ever see anybody talking about taking away the automobile or the alcohol that people are killed by. But every time there's a shooting, the first thing they want to do is attack the guns.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. The last line of defense at the schools should probably be some armed individuals. But I was wanting to look a little deeper into this at what are kids watching on TV and what comes out of Hollywood, but nothing but shoot them up, kill them, movies with guns. And these young kids are watching this, and it makes an impression on them.
Sure does. And you know what about the cultural rot, Bruce? The turning away, sponsored by our friends on the left, turning away from God, about banning God from our schools, about banning God from the public square. That has an effect, and I'll have words with any one of you progressive and liberals out there who says it doesn't. It does. It coarsens. What did Ronald Reagan say? A society without God coarsens the society, and without God, a democracy cannot long endure. And he's absolutely right, because it takes people of good moral character, a prompting of the conscience, he said. And without God, you don't have that.
Yeah, well, exactly. And you look at how a lot of the people on the left, especially here just recently, the ladies on The View, Joey Bear, when she had made fun of Vice President Pence, I believe it was.
She made fun of Christians. She made fun of Christianity. She and the ladies on The View attacked Christianity, and which is what the left does. I mean, and then they sit there and they'll wonder why their ratings are going down, because they offend the vast majority of this country who are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, look, Bruce, I got to ask you, because you brought something up at the beginning of your conversation that sparked a memory.
Yes.
The latest shooting that we had in the church here in Texas, the Dylan Roof shooting, where he shot up a church, and several others, what did they have in common? They had in common this, that individuals had guns who shouldn't have had guns, and that these government programs that our progressive and Democrat friends told us would keep us safe failed. Each one of those shootings was the responsibility of a failure of government. The guy out in Springtown, Texas, he got access to a gun. He should have been he was dishonorably discharged from the military, and he got his hands on a gun. And the military, the government inside the U.S. military, the Air Force, didn't pass that along to the database that said he shouldn't get a gun, and he was able to buy guns and then kill all those people. That was a failure of government, not a failure of we the people.
Yes, and every single one, and it hasn't been an exception yet, of these mass shootings have been at so-called soft targets.
Yep.
Has there ever been a mass shooting at an NRA convention?
That's a great point. Now, I don't want to plant any ideas into some unbalanced folks' heads to test that. But again, I think you've hit on the nail on the head right there, Bruce. Is the reason why these nutcases pick these soft targets is because they'll be able to ply their despicable trade without resistance, and they know it. And it's the reason why they choose movie theaters like they did in Colorado. It's the reason why they choose these schools. Bruce, thank you very much for the call, man. Very insightful. And I don't want to dismiss his point, folks, on the cultural rot. He's absolutely correct. This is part and parcel of this discussion. We have to address, it's a multifaceted problem. And to sit there and shrink away and say, oh, God, oh, come on. I think that's just as irresponsible of the folks on the left. Ramona, welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show. I'm glad you tuned in.
Hi.
Hi.
I am a teacher in
Yes,
Klein
ma'am.
ISD. I teach high school.
Okay.
I'm actually sitting in the parking lot ready to go into work right now.
Well, God bless you for
but
waiting.
I had to stay on with you because I have to tell you 3 points.
Sure.
And I may have to run. But one is they allow, we have maybe, I want to say 4,000 plus students in our school and 400 plus faculty members. So it's a lot. But I approached my security officer having seen a device that you can put under the door that slides under the door and slides to the side. And I cannot for the life of me remember the guy who made it, but they sell for like $100 a piece. I guarantee you, if parents knew those were out there, they would be demanding that the school districts purchase those, no matter what it costs.
Are they metal detectors, Ramona?
No, it's a metal device that slips under the door and keeps the door shut in case an intruder comes in.
Oh.
That's one thing.
Okay.
But the district, get this, the district wants us to put a card in the lock device between. That's not going to keep a shooter out. Sliding a card in there. My husband's in lock and door security. That's not going to work. So that's one. And there's a bunch of cameras in the building.
Yeah.
That prevents a lot of stuff. But put a camera in my classroom. Bring it on. If I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and the kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing, including the moral, background that you were talking about a second ago, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they're not going to be doing anything wrong. They're going to be learning, and the teachers are going to be teaching, and you can't get around a camera.
Well, and that is going to identify a shooter, but in my mind, that's a little bit too late. I mean, we know who he is or she is, but okay, what's number three?
No, I mean not to identify a shooter. I'm talking about to document everybody and make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing in the first place.
Understood. Okay.
Second.
Third.
If you psych eval kids each year, they fingerprint teachers. Psych eval these kids and these teachers each year. You'll know.
Well, the thing about it is that everybody on this campus knew about Nicholas Cruz, and no psych evaluation, Ramona, was needed. Everybody pegged him.
If they'd have done it, he wouldn't have been there.
Well, listen to this. This is a student. Listen to this before you got to go. Listen to this. This is one of his fellow students. Listen to what he says.
Honestly, a lot of people were saying that it was going to be him, stuff like that. We threw a lot of kids threw jokes around like that, saying that he was going to be the one to scoot up the school. But it turns out, everyone predicted it.
Everyone predicted it. So no psych evaluation was needed. This was as plain as the nose on your face, and nobody said anything.
Well, yeah, that's the deal. They slip it under the rug, and even if there is a psych eval, they're going to let it go because they don't want a black mark on their name.
Hey, Ramona, well, I've got you. Before you go, well, I've got you.
Yeah.
Look, you heard our story, maybe you didn't, or maybe you did, about the Attorney General dropping some letters to certain school districts around the state saying you cannot put pressure on teachers to vote progressive and liberal. You can't do that. You can't use taxpayers' money for this. I'm going to go on a limb and say you probably lean right, and maybe you're conservative. Do you feel intimidated by left-wing administrators on your campus sometimes?
Sometimes? Oh, my gosh. I've been teaching for 32 years. I retire in May. There is not $1 that you could give me that would make me do that job because it's backwards. That's what's wrong with our school districts is the administration and the district doing what they think is right.
Wow.
And they are paid by the state, but they don't do what the state wants them to do. They do what they want to do.
Well, I would suggest that some of these school districts who are dedicating taxpayers' money to electioneering and politicking, which is illegal, maybe if they put some effort into securing their schools and doing what they're supposed to do inside of the schools instead of pushing a left-wing agenda, that might be a better thing. Ramona, thank you very much for the call.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your service to the community. Bye-bye. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. Speaking of service to the community, I've got to verify this, so I'm not going to give names. There is a religious school that was, well, it's Catholic. Let me just call it Catholic. That I'm getting word, and I don't know. I've got to confirm this, but I'm getting word that a uniformed police officer was at Ash Wednesday services and was asked to leave. because he had his badge, because he had his sidearm on. If I get confirmation on this from the administration, I'll tell you who it is. But I'm sorry, folks. The values that are being pushed inside of our government-run schools are not American values. And we've got to stop it because guess what? We're all paying for it. Back in a minute. The Salcedo Show on The Voice. All right, folks, welcome back. It's the Chris Salcedo Show. I'm glad you've tuned in. Joined right now by one of my longtime contributors, Mary Ramirez, to the Chris Salcedo Show. Hey, lady, what's going on?
Good morning, Chris. I'm so jealous. You just were talking about the weather. I'm so jealous of your weather down there in Texas. We're excited if it's over 30 up here. We got the shorts out at 32.
Folks, she's in the frozen tundra of Minnesota, so that's what you got to understand. Look, I know that you had written something else this week before this massive tragedy in Florida, but I wanted to get your take on the aftermath, what we know so far about the shooter, about what we know about what has transpired, and maybe some ideas of solutions that are going from a female's perspective. What's going around in your head?
Well, when I think about what happened, I mean, obviously just a horrible tragedy, and I put myself obviously in those parents' shoes, or try to at least, and I can't even fathom what it would be like to lose your child like that, or to have a child attend a school where that's even possible. I mean, I have 2 children. It's I can't even comprehend. But, again, I think we're seeing a profile that matches a pattern. This kid had multiple warning signs of mental illness, of harming animals, of, talking amongst his classmates. I guess he was expelled.
Oh, did we lose the connection? I think we may have lost the connection. Hold on a second, Mary. You're breaking up just a little bit because of the internet connection. We'll let our friends at Skype catch up here for a minute, and then okay, go ahead. You were saying he did have a long track record.
Right, he had a long track record, and again, we see our friends on the left immediately pivot to gun control.
Yeah.
That's never going to solve the problem. The problem here is mental illness. The problem here is evil. The problem here is, as I heard someone say this morning, we're normalizing violence with the video games that are played, with the movies, with Hollywood. It's funny, too. You see a lot of these liberals in Hollywood come out. I think Chelsea Handler tweeted something this morning about gun control. You see these liberals in Hollywood come out against guns, but yet they're the ones producing all of these uber violent TV shows, movies, that are, again, normalizing violence. So for a kid with mental illness, like this kid clearly has, an evil individual, So the solution is not taking away guns. That's not, he would have found another way.
Well, and then they promote this degrading culture, and then they remove God from the public square and from the schools. It's just...
Well, what did we just see from Joy Behar? Was it yesterday on The View? Mocking Mike Pence for his faith. A faith that leads him to be a faithful man to his wife, a well-intentioned human being, a kind individual, and yet we got Joy Behar mocking Christianity while Hollywood glamorizes evil and glamorizes violence, and then we wonder why we have what happens.
I know. And you know what? You think that, the progressives don't have the imagination, in my view, in my opinion, they don't have the imagination to realize this is a multifaceted problem that goes from the culture, that goes to security and to preserving rights. And they just say, well, just take away the guns and everything will be fine. And nothing could be further from the truth, because these cats, these progressive liberals, they can't stop illegal drugs and illegal people coming from across that border. What makes us think they're going to be able to stop illegal guns? They won't. All they're going to succeed in doing is disarming the law-abiding. And all we're going to see is a criminal element that is armed and slaughtering Americans just like they slaughter Mexicans down there in Mexico. Let me get you on to talk about the article you wrote this week, because I wanted you to be able to touch on that.
Sure. So I'm sure you've seen the official portraits that were released this week rather, of the former president and his bride. They were interesting, to say the least. They're definitely not my cup of tea. And frankly, and this is all I'll say about the paintings themselves. I think that they degrade the dignity of the office of presidency. I think they're child.
No. You know what? they couldn't degrade the office of president any more than President Obama did himself. I mean,
in fairness,
those portraits actually were more respectable and more respectful of the office than President Obama ever was. But go ahead.
Right. No, you know what? And actually, in my piece this week, I point out, in fairness, they are a really good depiction of that presidency and what he did to the office. So I'm totally fine with him having chosen those artists or having chosen that style. But what I wanted to touch on this week was the artists themselves. I'm not sure how much you know about both of the artists that did these paintings, but there's some interesting individuals. And in the case particularly of the individual who painted the president, quite the racist.
Yes.
We've got a
well, wait a minute. You're a white woman. How do you feel about the president's portrait maker being a guy who depicts black women with knives beheading white women? That's who Barack Obama thought would be a great artist for his portrait. As a white woman, what do you think about that?
Well, what am I supposed to feel? When you think about the history of that Caravaggio painting, in which the featured female, Judith, kills an Assyrian general to save her people, what is that supposed to say to me? That I and everyone who looks like me should be killed in order to somehow rectify some wrong. It is the epitome of two wrongs make a right.
Well, that's the Obama way. What about Mrs. Obama's portrait? This one I didn't look very much into.
So this is interesting too. Amy Sherald, who is the artist who did this sort of grayscale painting of the First Lady, I've got a quote here from her. She says that she likes to depict black skin tones and shades of gray. And this piece goes on to say that a style that this artist adopted to remove the assigned color of her subjects, which is essentially what Michelle Obama led her to choose this artist. And what I find hilarious is, isn't it always the left that loves to make it about color, that loves to make it about race? And yet here the First Lady has supposedly chosen this person because she doesn't want to focus on color. She wants to paint in grayscale to remove the assigned color. She's got another piece entitled, and I'm just reading the name of the piece here, so forewarning, High Yellow Masterpiece, We Ain't No Cotton Pickin' N-word.
Yeah, ooh.
Yeah, which features two black men in suits holding cotton candy. It's supposed to be a throwback to the days of slaveholders and fields of cotton. And these people, they just, what I find so ironic is they love to live in a world that no longer exists. Yes, we have racism because we're sinful human beings, as we just saw in Florida. We have a sinful human being that just carried out a horrible act. There is racism yet today, but we do not live in Jim Crow South. And the funny thing is, the ironic thing is that the former president and former First Lady chose two people that fundamentally don't believe that the Obama presidency was an impossibility. Because if you buy into their narrative that we essentially live in Jim Crow South, the Barack Obama presidency is impossible. It can't have happened.
I think this was Rush Limbaugh pointed out yesterday that we have a movie that's about ready to open called Black Panther, and it's going to shatter records to the tune of $170 million on its opening. It's a superhero movie, folks. And his point was this. We live in such a racist country that a black featured superhero is going to shatter records. We live in such a racist country, folks, that we've elected a black man to the presidency, not once, but twice. And it's such a racist country. I think it puts an exclamation point on your piece. What's it called and where can people find it?
Sure. So go to my blog, afuturefree.com. I'll tweet it out after this segment. And it's 5 things you should know about the Obama's portraitists.
All right. Mary Ramirez, lady, thank you very much for being here on the Salcedo Show, as always.
Thanks as always, Chris.
All right. 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. Let me pivot back to what we've been talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about solutions for yesterday's shooting. You heard me and Mary talking about this. And I've got to point out, every single call I've taken this morning has been from a conservative. Every single call I've taken this morning who is offering solutions has been from a conservative or from a Republican or somebody who leans right. I have not heard one call from somebody of the left, a Democrat or a liberal, who says, let me offer my solution and let's talk about it. I think that's very poignant. And I think it speaks volumes about who is actually interested in finding solutions and talking about the ins and the outs of this very complex issue. Ron, I appreciate you waiting. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. So let me start by saying, and I know you agree, you're never going to get the guns out of the hands of the people in America. So we need to move past that idea that that's even a reasonable solution. It's not. So the other thing is we have to remember the school is bigger than the building. So I am a license to carry holder. I serve on a emergency response team at my church, and at any given service, there's at least a dozen of us who are armed and incognito.
Great.
So the first place we look for, and the schools need to consider this, is the parking lot. You can see in every one of these situations it coming to your school before it even gets in the building.
Yeah.
It is obvious. You can see them. They're either wearing clothes that are inappropriate, the gun's hidden underneath the clothes, they're looking suspiciously around, or they're actually dumb enough to have the weapon drawn and as they're walking up trying to shoot people to get in.
Hey, Ron, I've got a limited time before I got to hit the break. Are you able to hang on with me, because you sound very knowledgeable about this subject, and I want to pick your brain some more. Can you hang on?
Sure, I can hold on, Chris. Yep.
Folks, Ron, hold on. Everybody else on hold, we'll get to your calls, I promise. Because we as Americans and as Texans, we need to talk this out. We need to find some solutions here. What Ron was talking about, though, I think is emblematic of what we as conservatives are willing to do and what the American left is willing to do. They want you to believe that all we got to do is get rid of the guns all over the world, all over America. That's the easier lift, rather than doing what we're talking about, which is maybe a cultural change, maybe hardening these targets to make them less vulnerable to attack. They think the easier lift is getting rid of something they will never be able to get rid of. I find that fascinating. Back in a minute, the Chris Salcedo Show on The Voice. And that's going to do it here for the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide on the Vida Television Network. I want to remind everyone that I think I'm one of the few individuals on television who actually allows you to directly interact with me, unfiltered, live. All you got to do is call AM 700 KSEV 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV from the hours of 7:30 a.m. Eastern until 10 o'clock Eastern, and let your voice be heard. Maybe you don't think we covered something fairly, or maybe you don't think we've covered something enough. It's your chance to weigh in. You can also do so via social media. Go to chrissalcedo.com. All of our contact information is there, or you can do it live in real time during those same hours at Chris Salcedo TX. Even off hours, we respond to Twitter, and it's a good chance, if you make a compelling argument, it'll be featured on the show, if I'm not on the air at the time, the following day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. We'll see you next time.